Okay. It looks funny on my side. Can everyone see my screen? Okay,
Yep.
awesome.
Yes.
Excellent. Well, good morning, everyone. Sarah Johnson and I both work for the Kentucky Department of Corrections. As I said earlier, am the director of the Division of Reentry Services, and Sarah Johnson is the director of Addiction Services in the Kentucky Department of Corrections. So we wanted just to take a little bit of your time this morning, since this TAC is focused on removing Medicaid barriers for the justice-involved population, to really explain corrections as a whole and what we look like, what all we have going on, just to kind of set the framework for this group to kind of move and go forward. So I'll go through some slides. I definitely won't be like a school teacher and read all the slides to you, so I'm not going to bore you and do that. After we are done, I will get this PowerPoint to you, Steve and Charlie. That way, if you want to distribute it to the group, so everybody's got it as well.
Appreciate that. That'll be the next question, I'm sure.
Okay, perfect. So you all can see on here, our mission in the Department of Corrections is listed there, and it's twofold. It is to protect the Commonwealth, but also to provide opportunities for the offenders as well. We are a department that is located within the Justice and Public Safety Cabinet. You'll see on here, our commissioner is Commissioner Cookie Cruz. And within the Department of Corrections, there are 3 different sections. So briefly, we just kind of wanted to paint the picture of really what all and who all is involved in the Department of Corrections. So there's 3 different deputy commissioners that are involved, and then of course a chief of staff as well. So when we are working with clients in the Department of Corrections, our population has 2 sentencing authorities that they have to answer to. Sometimes both, sometimes one or the other. But that is people that are sentenced out of the court system. So they could have misdemeanor crimes, they could have felony crimes. They also can be sentenced, and their releasing authority can be the parole board. So people that have come into custody, serve some time, and then they have a little bit of a remainder time that they have to serve whenever they're released from custody as well, out in the community. So we have 2 sentencing authorities that the Department of Corrections actually works alongside with. And as I was saying, the mission is twofold. So our primary mission is, of course, protecting the community and ensuring that the population does fulfill all of the sentence requirements that the judge or the parole board puts on them. But while they're here, that is our job as well, to rehabilitate and actually make sure that we're providing opportunities and services in hopefully helping people when they are actually reentering back into society. We deal with a variety of different clients in the Department of Corrections. So you'll see on here, as of August 30th, and this is kind of a big number, so I really wanted to highlight this. I think it'll be a little bit shocking for you all just to see how many people we deal with. Between the inmate population and then those are on supervision in the community with probation and parole, we have right at about 80,000 individuals in the state of Kentucky that the Department of Corrections works with to try to rehabilitate. So about 18,000 are incarcerated, and there is about 60,000 out in the community as well. So we have people in the community living amongst everybody else that you just don't even know. It's not like they're walking around in an orange jumpsuit, but they have court-ordered requirements that they have to fulfill to be able to complete their sentence. We have reentry service centers and recovery Kentucky centers. These are what a lot of people know as a halfway house. So those are, names for halfway houses. So we have halfway houses throughout the state that we deal with. In Kentucky, we are one of only a couple of states in the United States that actually houses half of our state inmate population in our local county jails. That is not standard practice for all states throughout the United States, so it's a little unique. And you'll see as we talk, it does provide challenges to the department at times as well. So we have about half of our state inmate population in our prisons, and the other half are in our local county jails where they have elected jailers. So within the Department of Corrections, there are a few different support divisions. As I said earlier, and Sarah is over addiction services and I'm over reentry services. So we'll talk and highlight those 2 this morning. The Division of Reentry Services is actually in state government, I still say a new division. We're relatively new. We've only been a division since February 1st of 2018. So it is not a historic division. This is something that was put into place by the last administration. And we have come in and really got quite a few staff across the state. And our sole focus is to be that liaison to provide those services that a probation and parole officer might not have time to provide because they are enforcing the court's mandates, or the people that are working in a prison, they are maintaining custody and control and classification, making sure those type of things are happening. So we are there to be able to provide the programming and the resources. So that's our main focus in our division. You can see how we kind of have it broken up here into 7 different regions across the state. So there are, supervisory staff that handle the different areas across the state. We have a total of 80 staff now. We started in 2018 when I took over the division as director. We started with about 10 employees across the state, and just in that short time, we've grown to about 80 people now. Most recently, I'll talk about some of the recent positions, but until this year, you heard me say that half of our incarcerated population sits in the county jails. Until this year, the Department of Corrections did not have funding for staff to even attempt to help that part of the population with these services. So that's something that is new and exciting for us. I've got 7 employees across the state. There are over 70 jails. So you can see those numbers don't quite add up, but it's a start. It's a start and a way for the Department of Corrections to kind of tiptoe, improve that we're doing well, in hopes at some point leverage some more funding to be able to expand and help the rest of the population. In the local communities, so throughout the state, you have probation and parole offices. So there's about 50 to 60 offices throughout the state. And in the main district offices, I have 1 staff member that sits in each of these offices. And their sole job is to actually provide resources to the population. And those resources can look like just having clothes on someone's back, being able to have food to eat the next day, having a suit to wear to a job interview, needing transportation to get to a job interview, GED services, and also any type of reentry programming to help, like a fatherhood class or parenting class, something like that. So they do this. They also host informational events throughout the state. So one of the things I'll hit on just a little bit later is really what some of those informational events look like, but it can be something to learn how to get your record expunged and get that off once you have completed. That way they can get or make themselves more employable whenever their sentence is complete. Another employee that I have sitting in the local probation and parole offices are employment program administrators. These positions are specific to focusing on employment for the population. We have been super impressed with these positions. They are leveraged. We have leveraged grant funding to support them. So they are not a state funded position. They are funded out of the Kentucky Opioid Response Effort Grant. And they have been very, very successful. So it's not often you can see positions come in and start a program and it have almost a 50% success rate. And that's exactly what these positions have done. And so what they do is they meet with the clients that are out in the community that are under supervision within the Department of Corrections that are unemployed. And their whole job is to get them back to work. And they do the self-centered, person-centered assessments, and they will refer them to one of 3 different routes for employment, the ABCs of employment, and any job, which is just your McDonald's down the street, just getting them a job to get some funding coming in, a better job, and then ultimately a career. And they also do referrals to job skills training as well. That was really the positions in the communities. In the prisons, we do also have reentry coordinators. And that is one of the things that makes my division and Sarah's division unique is we both house staff that are inside the prisons, but also in the communities. So that way, that gap of when someone is released and they're coming out to the community, that historically was there over the years, that gap has been removed because we do have staff that are housed in both areas and they can talk to each other. So every prison, I have at least one reentry coordinator in it. We also have reentry coordinators in the prisons that teach evidence-based and promising practices and life skills programs. So being able to, really work on that criminal thinking, to be able to kind of change their mindset, all of that going forward. They conduct events in the prisons to bring resources into the population as well. So that way, when someone is released, they are more prepared when they're released. They do home placements for release to make sure they have a good place to go and they're not just getting kicked out of prison back on the streets. We have started a pilot program as well this year to where we are working with the Department of Transportation, and they are coming into the prisons to process state ID applications. So that way, when someone is released from incarceration, they actually are released with a state ID instead of having to go to their local clerk's office and try to get an ID that way. And most importantly, if for this purpose of this group is they work and coordinate their health insurance pre-release. So when someone is getting ready to be released, they work with the local Medicaid assisters to be able to process their applications pre-release. So that way, when someone is released, as soon as they're released, their insurance can be turned on, Medicaid application can be turned on, and there's not that gap anymore. And that's something that we recently started within the past few years as well. As I said, we do have, thankfully, also funded partially by the Kentucky Opioid Response Effort. We do have some positions that are now able to focus on the jail population. And so you'll see how these look. As I said, there are many other jails in the state, but we do have some positions that are focused on the population the jail populations that actually have a SAP program. So if a jail has a substance abuse program, and you'll kind of see them highlighted here on this map, but that is where we have someone positioned to be able to help that population. And they're doing the same duties that were listed on the prior screen, being able to help with home placements, providing resources, conducting events, and making sure that they have their Medicaid and application processed for when they are released from a substance abuse program. That way they are not just falling off of the earth, and there's that continuum of care as well. And that's all the stuff I actually just said, so we'll skip over that side. We do, as I said, we talk about and do programs in the institutions, but also in the community. And these programs are really kind of a key to being able to rehabilitate the population, teaching them any type of skill. It can be your daily skills as to how to do a bank account, how to be able to just function normally. You think I'll tell you a story actually really quick. I have been in corrections for over 15 years now. And I've worked as a correctional officer in a prison, and I worked as a probation or parole officer as well in one of my jobs. And the first week that I was a probation or parole officer, it really opened my eyes to see the incarcerated population. I got a phone call from a late 60s-year-old male who has been incarcerated for about 20 years. And he called me while I was standing in the gas station, and he said, I don't know what to do. I mean, he had no clue. He didn't know what to do. He had been incarcerated for 20 years. He was very institutionalized. And these type of programs really help with that, to really kind of prepare people for release. If you can imagine being kind of like a herd of cattle, you were doing the same thing for every day for years and years, and then all of a sudden you get released into society and you just don't know how to function sometimes. And so that's really the importance of these programs. So we teach those while people are incarcerated, but also we continue them in the community as well, to make sure that we are still providing that support. Some of the events that we host in our division, we do expungement sessions where we partner with AOC, DPA, in the local communities. This is no cost to anyone who attends. They get a free background check. So it really helps out the population understand, because you would be surprised the number of people that don't even remember what all's on their record after so many years. So be able to understand and get that background check. We have attorneys that are present on site to be able to kind of meet with them, give them advice on the process to apply for expungement if they are really wanting to, and provide that eligibility requirement. We host reentry simulations where we actually, it's kind of a, it's really a role play type scenario. It takes about an hour and a half, 2 hours, but we walk people through exactly what it is like to be released from incarceration, the first few weeks of release from incarceration. They have individualized real life scenarios that people walk through, you know, so Steve, if you were going to go through it, basically you would be given a life scenario and say, you know, Steve, you've been in prison for 10 years. You're being released, you've got $100. And here's what the court has expected you to do. So how are you going to do it? Right. And it really walks people through really what it is like, because it's very eye-opening to really see what this population does have to go through when they're released. And then we host job and resource fairs as well. And so these are just like, you know, when you went to college and there was a career fair, just like that. And that's exactly what it looks like. We host them inside the prisons, but also in the community to bring employers that are looking for people to work and are willing to hire the justice involved population, but also resources to the population as well to help them be successful. Just a few projects we have going on that I shortly hit on. We are partnering with the Department of Transportation, which is something that is new this year, to be able to provide state IDs to people at the time of release. This is currently active in 7 prisons. So it was a pilot program that just started about 6 to 8 months ago. And it's gone great. So far, we have processed 302 ID applications. So that's 302 individuals that are being released from prison that are getting out with a state ID, which makes them employability ready from day one. Because you can't get it. There are many things in the world you can't do without an ID, but getting a job is one of them. So this is something that has been huge. It is funded. One of the things, of course, that we do pilot programs within the Department of Correction, but funding is always a key issue of ours, because it's not like we get funded for these type of things. So we did leverage funding from the Kentucky Chamber of Commerce, but also from the Kentucky Opioid Response Effort as well for this. We also have a transportation voucher program that is funded, thank you, Van, by the Office of Drug Control Policy. This has gone great throughout the past year or so that we've been doing it. And basically what this is, it removes any transportation barrier that our population has to be able to get to a mental health appointment, a medical appointment, a job interview, any type of treatment they need. There's a variety of services. You know, one of the things in the communities that we hear all the time is, well, that's fine, you can refer me to all these services, but I can't get there. I don't have any ride. And if you live in the, you know, Louisville area, the Northern Kentucky area, the Lexington area, there's public transportation. We can usually work something out, but throughout the rest of the state, transportation is a huge issue. And so this pilot has actually removed that barrier and has been very successful. And then the other pilot we have going on is Reentry Mentor Pilot. We have this up and running in, I believe, 3 of our prisons, to where local citizens throughout the community can volunteer to be a mentor for someone who is going to be released from incarceration, and really help them kind of partner with them and help them walk through to be successful so they are not reincarcerated. And I will say, as of now, it has been a very small pilot, so there hasn't been a large number of participants, but at this time, we have 100% success rate on this. So not a single person that has been paired with a mentor has come back to prison so far. So it's been very good. Just to hit, I briefly touched on this, but basically the way that we do Medicaid in the Department of Corrections is a couple of different ways. I'll touch on it, but then Sarah will also touch on it when she speaks next. We have our local institutional reentry coordinators, but also now our jail reentry coordinators that work with the assisters, the Medicaid assisters that are in the community, to be able to say, okay, hey, Charlie, I've got these 10 people that are going to be released next month. And can you come in, either come on site or electronically, sometimes they do it electronically, to go on and meet with them and process their Medicaid application to get that in the works. And so that has gone very well so far for us. And that is happening at our prisons and at some of the jails where we do have a jail reentry coordinator as well. Okay, Sarah, I will be quiet and pass it over to you, and I'll flip the slides for you if you just tell me when to flip.
Thank you. And thank you all for inviting me here today. I am always excited to talk about the work that we do within addiction services because I'm really proud of the work that we do. Kristen talked to you a little bit about the population we serve and the fact that we have almost 80,000 individuals that we are responsible for. What we know is about 60 to 70% of those individuals have some form of a substance use disorder. And my division is responsible for clinically assessing and either providing direct treatment or providing referrals to treatment and recovery services. This is a huge responsibility that my division has, but what I like to say is we see it as a huge opportunity. It's an opportunity for us to employ the best evidence-based practices to really make a positive impact, not only on the individual lives that we serve, but also the families and communities across the Commonwealth that have been devastated by substance use disorder. This is a breakout of our map and my top tier of leadership. We also have regions, and we have branch managers that are assigned to those regions that oversee not only the staff within that region, but also our programs. We have 110 staff. Most of our staff are clinical. We do have administrative staff as well who help keep us in line and make sure that everything is operating smoothly. But primarily our staff are made up of clinicians. Next slide. So some of the things that I want to go through kind of what my staff are responsible for. The branch managers are kind of that top tier of leadership in my staff. They are the ones that are doing the clinical reviews on applications for those that are incarcerated that are interested in attending our substance abuse program. They're looking at level of care for parole upon completions. Kristen mentioned that the Department of Corrections is not the releasing authority. We are reliant on the judges and or the parole board to determine whether someone can go out on community supervision. If the parole board grants parole and requires substance use disorder treatment as part of that condition, then my staff do a clinical review with an ASAM screen to determine where they can participate in that. And we have various treatment entities that we work with out in the community, and we'll talk a little bit about that. But I really want to highlight that because we get a lot of questions about, well, why don't you put people out in the community to do treatment? And when the releasing authorities allow us to, we do. But we also recognize that when people are incarcerated and they're not eligible for release, we have an obligation to provide high quality treatment. And we're going to talk about what we do within our jails and prisons. Our branch managers also review any kind of terminations, appeals from individuals that may have not been successful in the program. They provide direct supervision of the staff and the programs to ensure fidelity. And when I say direct supervision of staff, I'm talking about not only personnel supervision, but they also provide clinical supervision for staff that are pursuing a license, a professional license. Quality assurance to our contracted partners, and as I mentioned, the clinical supervision. Next slide. We also have program administrators, and they're kind of our next tier of leadership. And our program administrators are located both in our prisons as well as in the community. So our staff that are in the prison, the program administrators, they are kind of the director of the Sept program within the prison. So they oversee that entire program. They review the applications for that specific programs. Our programs within the prisons are AODE licensed. So they are responsible for ensuring that we meet the standards of that licensure. And they act as the liaison between the program and the institution. Our program administrators in the community have each been assigned specialized tasks. One of them oversees SAMAT. SAMAT is the protocol that we have developed for medication for addiction treatment. And we'll talk a little bit about that later, but it is the clinical and medical protocol that we've developed for that program. We also have a program administrator that reviews individuals that are eligible to go out on home incarceration. We do that screening on the front end so that we can make sure if they need treatment that that's set up and there's not a gap in care. She also coordinates the contracts for the IOP programs with the community mental health centers and make sure that there's consistency with information that's being shared and processes that are being followed. Then we have another program administrator that handles our pre-trial substance abuse program. That is authorized through Senate Bill 4, and it allows judges, if someone meets statutory requirements, to allow them to participate in treatment pre-adjudication, with the end goal hopefully being that they be released on supervision and not have to be returned to incarceration. We also have a staff member that oversees our reentry service center and our quality assurance, our audit process, and we'll talk a little bit about that as well. And then we have a new process that started last year that we'll also talk a little bit more about, with DOC approved programs and quality assurance, and one of the program administrators is responsible for those duties. Of course, these are kind of their highlighted duties. They also have staff that they clinically supervise, and each are assigned specific programs that they're responsible to ensure fidelity of. Next slide. We also have social service clinicians that you hear frequently called SSC. We love our acronyms in state government. Our SSCs are located both in the prisons and in the community. So the SSCs that are actually in the prisons, they are the clinicians that run the substance abuse program. So they're facilitating groups, they're doing individualized treatment plans, they're doing assessments, they're doing aftercare and transitional plans. They are the ones that are the clinical staff running the program, the licensed programs. Then we have social service clinicians in the community, and they're located in each one of the probation and parole offices. And they serve a couple of different functions. Primarily, they assess and provide case management. So they can get referrals from the court or from the parole board asking for someone to be assessed and placed in treatment. So they would do a comprehensive clinical assessment that includes an ASAM screening, and then they would connect them with a provider in the community, depending on the level of care that is indicated from the screen. So that could be outpatient, it could be different recovery services, it could be intensive outpatient, short-term residential, long-term residential, detox, really just based on what the current need is of the client. And then they provide case management, because we know that sometimes that need changes over time. And so if someone is maybe participating in outpatient treatment program and there's some problems that indicate that they need a higher level of care, then they can quickly intervene and provide a referral for that high level of care. They also work very closely with Kristen's staff. So Kristen talked about signing up for Medicaid. They do a wonderful job of trying to get people signed up for Medicaid prior to release. But some people don't go to incarceration. Some people come straight from the court, or they come from a jail that unfortunately doesn't have coverage. So if they come out into the community and they do not have Medicaid, and prisons work very closely together to make sure that that is set up, and that any of those other ancillary services are needed. So when my staff does the assessment, we all know substance use disorder is messy. It's not just let's give them substance use disorder treatment and that fixes everything. There's typically issues with housing. Maybe there's problems with transportation. Maybe there's mental health care needs, medical needs. So where we're identifying a lot of those things, we're then working with Christian staff to help support those referrals so that we make sure we're not just addressing the substance use disorder, but also those other ancillary needs that are identified as part of that comprehensive assessment. Next slide, please. So this is a current snapshot of DOC contracted treatment options. And what I'll say is this is a fluid number. This changes very frequently. We have programs that are interested in applying, and then we also have programs that for whatever reason decide that they don't want to continue with a contract. So IOP, we have 1,470 options, and we do have a contract with every community mental health center for that modality of care. And we appreciate our partnership with the community mental health centers to provide that service.
We appreciate that as well. It's a good thing for us.
We also have 1,314 reentry service center beds, and that's kind of an umbrella when we say reentry service center. So some of those programs are programs that only DOC clients can go to. So some of the dismiss programs, CTS Russell, but we also have reentry service centers that offer community beds in addition to the contracted beds that DOC has, such as the Healing Places, the Hope Centers, Chrysalis House. So we have a pretty comprehensive list of different reentry service centers, and that is available on our website. I'm happy to share that with you all as well. We contract currently with 19 jails, and they offer 29 programs for a total of 1,590 beds. The jail contracts require that they mirror the programs that we provide within the prison. And our staff has the ability to oversee and ensure that there's fidelity. Of course, we have staffing requirements. They are also required to be AODE licensed. So they have that requirement of staffing to meet that licensure standard. And we'll talk a little bit more about the specific programs. We internally run 991 beds in our prisons. That's ran by my staff. Then we contract with a private prison, and we also contract with the Recovery Kentucky centers as well. So right now, like I said, a little over 6,000 treatment slots, but there's actually a lot more in addition to these paid, contracted, and internally ran programs. So we're going to talk a little bit about that as well. Next slide, please. And this is just a visual to show how much we've grown. So if you look back to fiscal year 2010, we just had a little over 1,000 treatment opportunities for individuals. And our population has not, significantly grown when you're talking about the amount of people we're serving and the need for treatment. So I think we have done a fabulous job, and I'm very proud of the fact that we are aggressively looking at how do we fill those service treatment gaps and make sure that anyone that is in need of treatment is able to receive and participate in that treatment. Next slide, please. So a little bit more about the different types of treatment. The substance abuse program, again, is offered in the institutions. It's operated by DOC. The jail programs are contracted by DOC, as well as the private prison. And then the residential community options and the outpatient options are also contracted through DOC. Next slide, please. So a little bit about what actually is the substance abuse program. I'm sure that all of you have heard the term SAP and have heard people talk about SAP over the years. But a lot of times people don't necessarily know what we do in SAP. And unfortunately, sometimes people think it's kind of a less than program. It's, that's what you can have because you're incarcerated. What I want to assure you of is the programs that we run, in my opinion, could be put up head to head with licensed programs in the community. We do run AODE licensed programs. So we have credentialed staff. We are following all the standards that are set by AODE licensure. We have OIG coming out and doing audits and making sure that we are following those standards. What we do in our jails and in our prisons is we run a modified therapeutic community. We recognize that peer-driven treatment is immensely beneficial to the substance use disorder population. So we use that evidence-based model for treatment. The curriculum we use is based on cognitive behavioral therapy, and it is an evidence-based curriculum designed specifically for the criminal justice population with substance use disorder, and that is through Hazelton Beatty Ford. Our staff have actually all been trained. We went through a 3-day training just a couple years ago on that facilitation with staff from Hazelton. We do have the annual audits from OIG, as I said, and we also have annual audits from addiction services themselves. So we do audits on our own programs as well as all of our contracted programs, because we want to make sure what someone says that they are doing, they are actually doing. And that even though it's evidence-based curriculum, it does need to be facilitated a specific way in order for it to have the intended effects. So we're really doing some fidelity assurance with those contracted and internal programs. Next slide, please. Oh, and then the staff, of course, meet the standards that are set out in the KAR. So some of the cool changes in SAP that have happened fairly recently. Again, thanks to Van and his office, we were able to get the updated curriculum for our programs. New Directions is the curriculum we use from Betty Ford Hazelton, and they came out with a new edition a couple years ago. And the really exciting thing about the new edition is that they added a co-occurring workbook, which allows us to treat individuals that have co-occurring in all of our incarcerated programs. Now, the co-occurring curriculum in this modality is really designed for individuals with mental health diagnosis that are where their symptoms are controlled. So we do have specific programs for co-occurring with SMI, and they would not be going through this specific curriculum or these specific programs. Those programs are primarily ran by mental health, and we work closely with them. But our programs are able to treat individuals that may be dealing with controlled bipolar or depression or anxiety, or some of those common disorders that we frequently see with substance use disorder. So we were so excited to be able to have that. We work very closely with the mental health staff as well when we're facilitating that curriculum and identifying individuals that would benefit from that curriculum. And we just recently, through assistance of Van and Kentucky Opioid Response Effort, were able to purchase those curriculum for all of our jail contracted partners. And we just provided a training for them on the facilitation of that curriculum. So now all of our incarcerated programs are using the most up-to-date curriculum, including co-occurring, and that's consistent across all of our incarcerated programs. Next slide, please. So I mentioned earlier SAMAT. SAMAT is the protocol that we've developed for medications for addiction treatment. And the acronym stands for Supportive Assistance with Medication for Addiction Treatment. We recognize and fully support the utilization of FDA-approved medications for addiction treatment as part of an individualized treatment plan for individuals that meet clinical and medical protocol. And we have made a lot of progress in our incarcerated populations. And then, of course, individuals that are in the community have a little bit more accessibility to the utilization of that. So in 2016, we started offering Vivitrol for any participant that went through our substance abuse program that either had an opioid use disorder or an alcohol use disorder, which is part of the reason we continue to call it MAT instead of MOUD, because we do use Vivitrol for that alcohol use disorder as well. We made some modifications in 2018, but we also added it for all of our jail programs. And again, this was possible through the Office of Drug Control Policy, allowing us funding to be able to really target that high-risk population. To incentivize it, we offered 90 days program good time credit in 2018. So if an individual has 6 consecutive injections, is in compliance with their supervision, and has participated in all the behavioral health components of the treatment plan, they're able to get 90 days taken off of their sentence, which is a huge incentive. All of our contracted residential programs allow Vivitrol. So if someone goes there and they've already initiated it prior to release, they can be continued on it. Or if they go into the program and they are interested in participating in it and they meet, again, clinical and medical protocol, then they would be able to do that while going through that treatment program. Our community SSCs do not only Vivitrol referrals, they do referrals for all forms of FDA-approved MAT. We have made revisions over the years, and we established a program administrator to oversee and provide quality assurance for that. And we've also started new data collection procedures. We work very closely with the University of Kentucky Center for Drug and Alcohol Research, and we worked with them on developing some new data collections so that we could make sure that this is having the intended effects. Next slide, please. So that was kind of where we were, and then we've made some progress. So in 2000, I think it was 2019, we applied and were granted an NGA grant to allow for training for expansion of MAT for the criminal justice population. And this was really exciting because not only did we get to hear from other states and about they were successful in doing and struggles that they faced, but we also, as part of this grant, pulled in other agencies with us. So it wasn't just the Department of Corrections. We had folks from the Justice Cabinet. Van was on the team. Katie Marks with CORE was on the team. We worked with Dr. Brenzel from Behavioral Health on this. So we brought a lot of very knowledgeable folks to the table to talk about how do we do this and how do we do it right. As a result of that, we were able to get grant funding through CORE, and we were able to pilot the use of buprenorphine for individuals that are incarcerated. We've done that so far at 3 prisons. And the way that works is we target individuals that are at high risk for overdose 60 days prior to their release. We initiate Subutex if they meet clinical and medical protocol. And then directly prior to release, we utilize the Subuclade, which is beneficial for multiple reasons. It assists with diversion, obviously, but it also is very helpful when you're talking about continuity of care and making sure that someone can have their next injection set up with no gap in between, have Medicaid set up to pay for it, all those type of good things. We use the Core 12 model when you're talking about which MAT to use. So there's those 3 pathways with the Core 12 model that's looking at either abstinence-based pathway, Vivitrol, or Subuclade, buprenorphine. So it really is obviously dependent on the person's clinical and medical protocol, which pathway is open for them. Some people only have one pathway that they can choose from. Others have all 3. So we really want to facilitate as much self-determination as possible, but we also provide education about the benefits of MAT as part of an individualized treatment plan, and especially for those individuals that are at high risk, because we know that someone is, or the incarcerated population is significantly higher risk for a fatal overdose after release than the general public. So we really need to try to target and protect that population. Next slide, please. So something else that we did that was super exciting, we recognize that we treat people as soon as we can when it comes to their substance use disorder. Because we have a limited amount of beds, we do have to target that for individuals that are closer to release, because we want to make sure that they get treatment before they're released. But what we recognize is as we expanded our treatment options and we were able to treat people earlier during their incarceration, sometimes there would be a gap. So they complete the substance abuse program, but maybe they're not even eligible for release for 6 more months or a year or a year and a half. And so then what happens to that population? Well, what happens is they end up back in general public or general population. And when you put an individual back into general population, it actually they can lose the positive effects that they gained, but they also can be at risk for victimization because of that accountability that they have went through within the substance abuse program. So what we created were Aftercare Dorms. And these Aftercare Dorms are called SOAR, Supporting Others in Active Recovery. And what it does is it allows for somebody that has completed SAT to go into this pro-social environment to continue actively working on their recovery and reentry preparation. And they can stay there indefinitely. So until they're ready to be released, they can stay in that program. So what happens in that program is we do have a core curriculum, again from Hazleton, called My Ongoing Recovery Experience, that they're eligible to participate in. But they also work when they're in that program. They have GED offered. They have things like MRT and New Directions and different life skills programs so that they're able to really prepare themselves and continue to work on getting ready for that reentry transition. We started this in 2019, and we were actually able to expand it to 3 jails last year, which was so exciting because the jail population, again, needs this service. And I get really excited when I talk about SOAR, and I'm a visual person. So the way that I try to explain this is, if you think about, when there's an oil spill and the animals that get covered in oil, right? So if you imagine an animal that was covered in oil and that we helped them, we got the oil cleaned off, we got them healthy, we got them clean, we worked with them for 6 months to help them heal in Sept. And then we just put them back in the middle of an oil spill by putting them back in general population. And I don't know if that's a great analogy, but the whole point is, if we're going to offer treatment, we have an obligation to offer continuity of care. We have to make sure that somebody has a way to continue their recovery process until they're released. And then the great news is then they're connected to my staff in the community, and they work with them on the aftercare and transitional needs that they have when they go out. So there's that warm handoff, but we can't have that gap. And SOAR fills that gap. Next slide, please. Something else that we have worked really hard on, and Kristen's shop has helped us with this as well, is we recognize the importance of family and community in support of individuals with substance use disorder. And a lot of times, we talk to family members and they want to help, but they just don't know how. So we have really made an effort to do more family and community outreach and engagement. And we changed our web page. We provide a lot of helpful information, brochures. We're partnering with other agencies to actually do in-person, prior to COVID, opportunities for people to come, see what local resources are available, go through a reentry stimulation, have Narcan training, just kind of opportunities for family members to be able to come and talk to people about what is available to them, how can they help their loved one be successful upon release, and be able to meet different individuals and get their questions answered. So that's really exciting. We've also started that in some of our prisons as well, where we're able to bring family members in for extended visits. And it's not just an extended visit, it's also an opportunity for us to provide information and education to the family so that they can assist their loved one once they are released and being successful. Next slide, please. So just a summary of some of the changes that we've done within the division and things I really want to highlight is we have really standardized our treatment. We're making sure that John Smith, regardless if he ends up at Laurel County Jail or Kentucky State Reformatory, he's going to receive the same high quality licensed treatment program. We've also implemented the assessment tool with level of care that includes ASAM. That's a relatively new thing. All my staff have went through the ASAMS training. They are now utilizing that. We want to make sure that we're not over-treating people. We want them to have the care they need, but we also do not want to over-treat people. And we want to make sure that we're using an evidence-based tool to determine that level of care in addition to our clinical judgment. We've also offered different modalities and different levels of care because we recognize that not everyone fits into certain silos. So we have to have that whole continuum of different types of care. We've expanded our MAT offerings to the incarcerated population, updated archaic policies and procedures to make sure that we're meeting people where they're at and offering them treatment that they need. We've fine-tuned our audit tool and corrective action plan to make sure programs that have deficiencies are correcting those, and those are corrected in a timely manner. Added the co-occurring. We have referrals to non-contracted treatment programs, which I'm going to talk a little bit more about. And something I really want to highlight is we have changed the message. Something I realized, I've been in this position for 3 years, and something I realized very early on when I came in is that somewhere along the way, the message got distorted and people saw my staff as punishers. They saw treatment as punishment. And so we've made a really focused effort on helping people to understand that we're not here to punish you. Treatment is not punishment. If you have, a violation that has substance use disorder components, a positive urine drug analysis, failing to comply with the terms of treatment, something like that, I don't want them to see coming to my staff as, okay, now you're in trouble, so now we're going to do this to you. No, we want to meet you where you're at. We want to see what's going on, what happened, and we want to have a therapeutic response to whatever the behavior is. So we're really trying to change that message and flip the script, not only internally with our own staff, but to the public, that we are treatment providers and we are here to help, not to punish. Next slide, please. So some of the cool things about leveraging Medicaid that I wanted to focus on, we have used non-contracted treatment facilities across the state for years. But something cool that happened through House Bill 284 last year is it created a pathway for us to have any licensed substance use treatment facility to apply for a non-financial MOU with DOC. So why would somebody want a non-financial MOU with DOC? Well, because we advertise them on our website, we refer to them when it's the appropriate modality of care, and we also label them as DOC approved, which allows any individual that goes to their program to receive program good time credit off their sentence. So we have certain standards that we expect in order to even consider someone as a DOC approved program. Some of those standards are AOD licensure. They have to utilize an evidence-based curriculum. They have to have individualized treatment plans that they can send us examples of. So there's certain qualifications, but then there's actually a further screening process for programs that want to apply. And then what we ask of them through the MOU is certain reporting requirements, which allows us to make sure that people get the credit that they're entitled to if they have criminal justice involvement. So by doing this, we already have over 90 approved locations that within just this year has admitted over 800 clients. So when you're talking about leveraging Medicaid funds, we all know state has very limited dollars. And, we have 6,300 and some treatment slots that we pay for, but we know the need is bigger than that. So this is allowing us to leverage those Medicaid dollars to pay for more individual to go to treatment. And it also allows us to take those limited dollars and those contracted slots and reserve them for individuals that may not have benefits, or maybe their benefits won't cover the level of care that they need. Incarceration is really tricky because when we're talking about Medicaid funding or private insurance funding, when they look at somebody that's been incarcerated, sometimes they want to look at their last 30 days. Well, their access is a little restricted when they're incarcerated. And we typically look at individuals more like they're in a bubble during their incarceration, and we look at what was their use prior to, in addition to their behavior while in, but, because their access is restricted. So there are times when they won't fund the level of care someone needs, and we need to be reliant on those contracted options to be able to do that. But Medicaid is also leveraged for that continuity of care when it comes to MAT. And making sure that individuals can continue on that individualized treatment course that we have worked with them on. Next slide, please. So the other thing that's really exciting, and several of the people on this call worked on this, and I was lucky enough to be a part of that amazing work group. House Bill 352 required that the Department of Medicaid Services and the Department of Corrections develop and submit an 1115 demonstration waiver. And we had a great work group that came together that did file that. And the last update I had is that it was found to be complete by CMS, and that we are waiting to see if it is approved. But it's super exciting because not only will it help us maintain funding for what we're currently doing, but it also allows for expansion. We know that the need's there. We know we have more people that we need to serve. In a perfect world, I would love to be able to start providing treatment the day somebody walks in. And let them, be able to really work on themselves during their entire incarceration, not just at the tail end. So I'm very hopeful and very excited about what this would do for this population. And again, we treat people in the community when we are able. But for that inmate population that is not eligible for release, we also have an obligation to provide them treatment. Not just allow them to sit there and be kind of warehoused waiting to be released. Let's treat them now. Let's make sure they get the high quality treatment that every individual in the community has access to and is eligible for. They deserve that as well. And we want to make sure that we are able to provide that to them. Next slide. Kristen, I'll hand it back to you for this one.
I had to figure out how to go back and unmute my screen. Thank you so much, Sarah. So hopefully you all can see, this is actually our last slide. And so hopefully you all can kind of see just over time how the Department of Corrections has come, because it, historically, Sarah and I have been in these seats for a few years now. And prior to us, you always heard, Department of Corrections was very siloed. It didn't really work together. There was a lot of separation. There weren't as many resources for the population, those type of things. And over the past several years, the Department of Corrections has really come a long way. So I was happy to be able to showcase a lot of the things that we're doing for the group this morning. And then, of course, highlight and talk about where we stand with Medicaid, how we use it, when the application process happens, for us, all of those things as well. But we just wanted to end on a high note just to show, when you look overall at what the Department of Corrections is doing, this really shows that what we've started doing over the past few years is working. It's really working. Our recidivism rate is going down, which means those are less people coming back into incarceration and saving the state dollars, because it is super expensive to incarcerate. We all know that. So we would much rather have other areas of the state taking up the state's budget than being housing people in prison. So that is all we have for today. I don't know if anybody has any questions, but I will stop sharing my screen now.
All right. Wow, that's a lot of information. Very robust program you all have. And it's exciting to see that opportunity. I think it's a good thing. We've all been waiting patiently. I know Leslie was on. She's still on, Leslie Hoffman. We hear about the 1115 waiver too, Sarah. We're eager to see that take place. I think we're all very interested in that, and start that, process, because even being eligible for Medicaid doesn't mean you're accessing services yet. You have a way to pay for it, but you still got access. I think the 1115 creates that mechanism, right, Leslie?
Yes, I was just going to let you know, we still haven't heard from CMS, except that I meet with them on a regular basis about anything going forward, and they keep telling me that it's still very positive. They're not saying no to it. They just want to make sure that all the policies and procedures for them are in place first. Because Kentucky's started this process, many other states have started now, and they don't want to approve something when they're not prepared, if that makes sense.
We're all waiting. Again, the good news is it hadn't been a no. I mean, they could have said no a long time ago and they
That's
didn't.
correct.
Right, Leslie? Right,
That's
Sarah?
correct.
So, may not be a yes yet, but it ain't a no either. So we're in a good place. Any questions? That was a great presentation. A lot of information.
Yeah, Steve, I just wanted to highlight, you can easily understand now why I like partnering with these two ladies. Their enthusiasm, they are rock stars. There's years past, we could have never pulled off a fraction of this. Wasn't that many years ago, we could have never even wrote an 1115 waiver to do this. So we've come a really long ways, gotten much more clinical, gotten much more professional. And I can't say enough about these two ladies and their leadership and the work that they've done.
Yeah. Evidence by what we just learned. It's good stuff. All right, any questions? And we'll get the PowerPoint to everybody. We'll go from there. Next, I had asked Dr. Sheila Schuster to join us. She's going to talk about what a TAC can do and its function. I think it's many of us, I've served on the behavioral health TAC with Dr. Schuster. Just an idea of what we can do. Typically, we can make recommendations to the MAC, which is kind of our overseer, the Medicaid Advisory Committee. This is our second meeting. I'm not totally convinced we are in position to make a recommendation quite yet to the MAC. However, I think the quick education about what takes place, and Sheila's going to help us, her experience on the behavioral health TAC and what we can do and what maybe we can start thinking about down the road of recommendations and how we can approach that. All right, Sheila, go ahead. Thank you. Glad you're here.
Thank you very much, Steve. And thank you to Kristen and Sarah for a lot of good information. I'm delighted to be with you all. I was one of the advocates behind the scenes that worked with Representative Moser on House Bill 53 to make some changes in some of the other TACs and also to get this reentry TAC going. So this is exciting. This is the newest TAC. Back in about 6-7 years ago, there were several TACs that were added. One was our behavioral health TAC. There was a children's health TAC that was added. There was a TAC on intellectual and developmental disabilities. And there was a therapy TAC, OT, PT, and speech. And so those are the latest TACs, and now you all. So, and I've, excuse me, as Steve mentioned, I've been the chair of the behavioral health TAC since its inception. So I think that the MAC and TAC structure gives a lot of leeway for people on the ground to make recommendations to Medicaid. So let's think about what that structure looks like. And if I were better with graphics, I would have done a PowerPoint and made you a graphic. But let's think about the MAC, which is the Advisory Council for Medical Assistance, but we all call it the Medicaid Advisory Council. So that's the group that is established by statute to receive information from the various TACs and also to bring in information that they ask for. And their job is to be advisory, obviously, to the Medicaid department. The MAC actually has transformed itself over the last 6 or 7 years. It went from meeting quarterly to meeting bi-monthly because there was so much need to be active with the Medicaid department. And I think in the current administration, they have been very receptive to attending the MAC and TAC meetings, to providing guidance and feedback, and working in a collaborative way with the MAC. So
Sheila, are those MAC meetings public?
Yes, those MAC meetings are public, and I was going to tell you all they meet on the 4th Thursday of the month, except in November, because that would fall on Thanksgiving. They meet from 10 a.m. to 12:30, and that Zoom link is available, excuse me, on the DMS website. I would really encourage you all to sign on and to watch the MAC meetings. I try not to miss them because you get the most up-to-date input from the Commissioner of Medicaid and from staff There are various issues that the MAC has asked about, and they report back on those as progress is being made. One of those, for instance, is on the maternal mortality rate, which in Kentucky is very high. And so there's been an ongoing discussion. They're going to have another report in November on that from Dr. Terrio, who is the medical director at DMS. You also get to hear what the other TACs are doing, because one of the parts of the set agenda of each of those MAC meetings is to list all 16 of the TACs. And we, the chairs of the TAC, give a brief report and also give those recommendations. So there are 22 members of the MAC. Not all of the TACs have a representative on the MAC, but you all in this legislation were given an appointed seat. So you have a voting member on the MAC, which is very important. So you have an extra kind of linkage, if you will, with your MAC. The chair of the MAC right now is Dr. Beth Parton, who is an advanced practice registered nurse, runs a rural health clinic in Adair County. The vice chair is Nina Eisner from the Ridge, which is a behavioral health hospital, and the secretary, I think, represents home health. So you will have a regular update from the Commissioner of Medicaid at the MAC meeting, as well as other officials. So the TACs are advisory to the MAC, and our power is that we can bring recommendations to the MAC. The MAC will hear those recommendations, and then at each meeting, they will take a formal action to approve those recommendations and shoot them up the line to Medicaid. The good news is that they don't go into a bottomless pit, never to be heard from again, which is what sometimes happens in the bureaucracy of state government. So each one of those recommendations from the TACs go to the Medicaid department, and they try very hard to review those and return a written response. It goes back to the MAC, but it also is sent then to the TAC voting members. So in that 2-month cycle, you can make a recommendation, and you can expect before the next meeting of the MAC to get some response back from Medicaid. You can decide at that point whether you're satisfied with the response from Medicaid, whether you want to make another recommendation or ask a question in a different way, or ask for additional information. So the TAC, Steve asked about a quorum. You cannot conduct a meeting or make recommendations if you don't have your quorum. So you have 12 members, which means that it's too bad we didn't make that an uneven number. It's easier to get a quorum with an uneven number of members. So you need to have 7 out of your 12 members, your voting members who are there. Each TAC elects a chair and a vice chair. You are encouraged to set your meeting schedule and get it to Charlie, who is the liaison for all of the TACs and the MAC, so that your schedule can be posted on the DMS website. If you think in terms of when the MAC meets, you want to meet, and obviously you're trying to meet 2 weeks or 3 weeks before the MAC meets, because you've got to give your chair time to do a brief write-up in writing of your meeting and of your recommendations. And that needs to be sent to Charlie at least a week before the MAC meeting, so that you have some requirements for paperwork there and so forth. And then your chair or some other voting member of the TAC can present that in a brief summary. And sometimes I always give long-winded reports, so sometimes they ask me to give a shortened version if they're running short on time. But you have to be a voting member of the TAC in order to present that report. The MAC meetings are not open in the sense of, if you're on the Zoom, you're really not supposed to speak up unless you're a member of the MAC or you're giving the TAC report. But the kinds of things that we've done in the behavioral health TAC have been around policies that we think need to be changed. So for instance, for years and years, we recommended that Medicaid go back to a single formulary. And the reason that's important is that with 6 now MCOs, each one of them has their own formulary, which means that when you're writing, when you're a prescriber of psychiatric medications, let's say, you have to know what are the preferred drugs, what are the rules for prescribing and so forth, and they change because there are 6 different formularies. So that actually happened through legislative action and has been in effect now since July 1st. So sometimes it takes years and years. So those are some of the things. Another recommendation that we made over and over and over again was that Medicaid not have copays. And particularly for people with behavioral health. And when I use the term behavioral health, I'm talking about a mental illness or a substance use disorder, or Sarah mentioned both, what we call co-occurring. And I used to say to the MAC, you know, I think we ought to be paying people for appointments. If they have a behavioral health issue, we certainly should not be dinging them for pay. I think sometimes people look at a $2 or $3 copay and say, well, what's the big deal? Well, if you're on a limited income, which means you qualify for Medicaid, and you've got sometimes 7, 8, 9 medications at $3 a pop, and then you go in for an office visit, which may be another $3. And what we were finding was that people were not keeping their appointments. So again, Medicaid tried very hard to get rid of copays in this administration. They found that there was a state law that required them to have at least a minimal copay, and that was changed in this last legislative session so that the copay has now been completely removed. Not all of our recommendations meet with such success. I wish I were batting 1,000, but it gives Medicaid an idea of what your particular TAC is concerned about. So one of the things I know that the Reentry Coalition has worked on is the need for IDs. And I'm delighted to hear, Kristen, that you've got these programs set up to get people an ID before, you know, or as they walk out of prison or jail. That's fantastic. So that would be one of the things that, you know, certainly in terms of Medicaid, we want to be sure that there's no gap so that people don't fall off the cliff. They come out of prison or jail and then, you know, they have no coverage. They've got to find a connector in the community. They've got to get signed up. And in that interim period, they could be losing services and could be getting into trouble because they're not getting their medications and so forth. So your recommendations need to be Medicaid specific. If there are things, and I see my friend Adrian is on here as a member of the TAC, so we know that housing is a huge issue. It's something we talk about all the time in the behavioral health TAC, because we know that many of our homeless Kentuckians have significant substance use and mental health issues. And while housing is not necessarily a Medicaid service, it is covered under the Medicaid waivers, and there are collaboration programs. And many of our Medicaid MCOs now, managed care organizations, are doing what they call social determinants of health. So we know if people don't have a stable living situation, meaning housing, we know that if people don't have access to nutritious food, if they live in a food desert, or they have no funds for that. So all of those things affect health. And we know that the managed care organizations have been directed to do more in those areas. So I would say, think broadly, think boldly about what your recommendations are. You know, Medicaid could come back and kind of lightly slap your wrist and say, well, that's not really under the purview of Medicaid. So figure out what part of that is. We've got a problem with transportation of people with mental illness by EMS. And we've brought this up over and over again. And Medicaid has said, well, that's not really ours. Well, that's a transportation problem. And now we're working on it with the Kentucky Hospital Association and the Long-Term Care Association. So some of these things are ways to inform and educate. I think that I try always in my report to remind the members of the MAC, because they have the ability to make motions and carry things forward to DMS, that I want them to understand what the needs of the behavioral health community are. So your job really is to educate Medicaid and all the things that you all know from your lived experience and from your provider experience about what people returning to society need. And that's really the function of the TAC. Steve, I see that you have lots of people on here, which is great. You know, I believe that the more open these TAC meetings are, the more you hear from people that have an issue that they want to bring up, the more open your agenda is, the better off you will be and the more functional you'll be. So I'll stop at this point, Steve, and see if there are any questions.
Any questions for Dr. Schuster?
Be bold, go boldly into the night.
Or into the TAC?
Or into the TAC, right. I've got my notes written up, Steve, I'll send them to you. You know, me, I don't like doing PowerPoints if I could avoid it, so.
Right.
There really are not many rules. And
No,
the other thing is, you need to be conducting your meetings according to the Kentucky Open Meetings, Open Records. And Charlie is a great monitor of that and will remind you if you're straying from that. So you have to be careful about being sure that everybody has equal access to your materials and so forth. The other thing is, if you have members of the TAC that need assistance with getting their transportation costs taken care of, that is provided for. And you ought to get a form from Charlie for people to get reimbursed for that. The consumer TAC, which has been rejuvenated in the last couple of years, is run by Emily Beauregard, is really forging ahead with making sure that people have complete access, because we have some people on the consumer TAC that have significant disabilities and need an assistant and that kind of thing. So it's not just meeting the minimal ADA requirements, but really making sure that we have full participation from everybody that ought to be participating in the TACs and in the MAC. So I will leave that with you also. Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you, Sheila.
Sure.
Any questions?
Steve, this is Leslie.
Yeah.
You all had requested some information. I think I sent it to you in between the two meetings, and Leanne can do a short presentation if you want her to give that information today. I was just going to share that I didn't see us on the agenda.
Yeah, that's probably my bad. I apologize. Yeah, go ahead, Leanne.
Okay, I'll go ahead and share my screen. Oh, I cannot. Charlie, can you allow me to share my screen?
You should be able to now.
Okay. Nope, it still says host disabled participant. So I don't know if a lot of you are familiar with our reentry program. It started with an NGA back in 2018. And we have been working since then. We've had many additional members that are on that. And what we wanted to do was to get that person that before they're released connected with an MCO care manager to work with getting appointments, everything set up after they're released. And what I did is I took from the date in question, that the last meeting, and I did some work together. So here's what I have done. As of last meeting, there were 8,621 Medicaid enrollees that were incarcerated. Yesterday, we received another report on our from Lee Geis about Medicaid numbers, and that has increased in the 2 months to 8,776. So our goal is to improve the outcomes for people with SUD and SMI, excuse me, and to decrease recidivism. As of 11/15/2019, we began to really look at some quality measures and to look at how the program is doing. So since then, we've had 675 released individuals that met criteria for the program. To be in the program and chosen, we look at two sites, Kentucky State Reformatory and Kentucky Center Institution for Women. And those that are within 6 months of release, and they have to meet a mental health level of a 2 or higher, or a substance use code of medium or higher. They are assessed many times during their stay. They are assessed upon entry into incarceration and upon release. So we looked at those. We have a staff member, her name is Donna, within Medicaid, and she gets reports from DOC daily and weekly. She looks for those that have, and we know that release dates are fluid. We could say today that that person is going to be released in 6 months, and then they get released tomorrow. So we try to look at those that have them within 6 months of release so that MCOs can start working with them. We have the MCOs, we have reentry coordinators. Right now we're working with 7 counties since a lot of those are close to Louisville, those 2 facilities. We use probation parole on our team as well. All 6 MCOs have a representative on that team. We do meet monthly and we discuss what's going on, any issues, any success stories. And we're also right now looking and improving our procedures. And if our amendment gets approved, then we have done a lot of footwork for that. So here's some data that I put together. Of the 675 released, you can see how many from each MCO has at least one contact with the released person. A 42% rate, that has definitely stayed, has increased. We found some issues with people that have no longer have any kind of probation parole or anything with DOC left, and it's hard to contact them, or their benefits have been, they don't have any benefits. So once again, with finding that, we have increased. Once Donna has a person that has been released, she sends that to a contact with DCBS and with DOC and finds out about their Medicaid benefits and the release date. So we're trying to get updated information instead of just sending a cold email to an MCO care manager so that they can follow up. Well, what we have seen is MCOs don't just try once or twice to get a hold of someone. There's multiple attempts, multiple emails and contacts within our team members, DOC, DCBS, Medicaid, and we find out if they no longer working with the person or why that is. And sometimes in some situations, there are people that just refuse the service, refuse the help from their MCOs. Once again, does anybody have any questions? Kind of quick overview.
Good stuff.
Leanne, did you have some additional information from DOC? I think in another email.
I did. I'm looking for that.
I was going to say I might have it real quick. Send that out separate.
Leanne, the ability to expand that to other prisons, is that purely a cost measure?
Yes, and we haven't really discussed about, before Dr. Liu left, we did discuss about opening up to more centers and more facilities, but there, I guess what we had talked about is who is the authority to say, yes, let's open it up. Let's move to others and where we need to go from there.
Yeah, I remember this early expansion is part of the core funding, is it?
Right now, we don't have any funding. We're just continuing with the work we did with NGA, And because of that work that we did, and we have the reentry program, yes, CORE has funded with Lisa Vanderpool within the Department of Behavioral Health. They have
Right.
funded more reentry coordinators within other facilities.
Okay.
I found the data. So since November 15th, 2019 data, 12% of those that we have worked with have been either rearrested or reincarcerated. And 36% of those have participated in a program of SAP, PSAP, or SOAR.
And I will say too, Leanne, that's exactly what I was going to say, Sarah. Sarah made the comment in the chat that most of the SMI population is generally housed at KCIW and KSR, which is why we started there. But there are individuals in the other prisons that we could expand to. So if you all are ready for expansion, you hit me up and we'll make this happen because I'm on board.
Well, members of the TAC, our first recommendation could very well be that we would like to see this program expanded. Recommendation we can make, to process, we need a motion to that effect and then a second, but I'd entertain a motion to make a recommendation that the reentry program through Medicaid be expanded to other facilities, other locations, other prisons. That makes sense, Kristen?
Absolutely. I agree. I will make the first motion.
Very good. Need a second?
Leslie, how much of a problem does that cause for you all?
Well, if we get the waiver, that would be a first step. If we get the waiver amendment, that would definitely be a first step in the right direction. I don't know how much I can push something that we're already doing past NGA's.
Right. But I think from the tax perspective, we would like to see more of this, and whether it comes back to Medicaid, we can't do without funding, that's okay. I mean, the MAC would then review the recommendation and Medicaid would respond to it as the process goes. And we'd see from there what happens. It doesn't necessarily, we can't commit Medicaid to it.
Right. And Steve, we've never been opposed to this. We actually thought it was a really good idea when we started it. So it's whatever recommendations you all want to make. I don't want to have any interference with that. And like you said, we'll make our responses back the best we can. But again, we've never been opposed to this. We think it's a good idea.
Right. And this is just another voice saying the same thing.
Yes, sir.
I'll go ahead and second it, Steve, but I think we probably, before we present it to the MAC, we may need some more information to back us up.
Okay. All right, it's a motion and a second. Slightly amended to get additional information. We'll work on that. I'll send that out so everyone sees what that is. So it may not be on the next MAC meeting. It may take us a little while to get there and do the following one, the November meeting. But we'll work on this topic. Again, all in favor, signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed and extensions. All right, we have a recommendation. Even preliminarily, we'll move forward and flesh it out and go from there. All right. Thanks for that information. Appreciate it, Leanne. Thanks for your help, Kristen and Van. All right, anybody else?
Welcome.
And we'll send an email out about our November meeting when we can do that. It may just poll folks what works. I know it's awkward. I forgot it was. Could have checked before we picked the date for Veterans Day, but we'll go from there. All right. Anybody else? Okay. I thank you all. We'll be talking. Take care.
Thank you all.
All right. Thanks, Charlie, for your help.
Bye, everyone.